And welcome to a very good evening to everyone, and welcome to another session for your Geriatric Care Specialist course. And today's topic will be legal and ethical issues of the elderly care. So, first of all, just let me know that if you are able to see my screen clearly and listen to my voice clearly.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, this is the thing, if we'll talk, is basically the baseline what you need to follow. See, in India, if we especially talk about physical therapy, okay, I'm not considering any other pathy or any other medical uh, directives or medical side into this particular condition. We as a physio have a very less paperwork as compared to the other therapies. Okay, if you will go to a doctor and he or she will be suggesting you for a surgery or something like that, before a surgical procedure or admitting the patient to a hospital or going for any kind of proper care, there is a thorough paperwork which is done. But when a patient is actually subjected to physical therapy, they are subjected to a very minimal or uh, an equivalent to no paperwork for this matter. Okay, which creates a lot of legal and the ethical issues. And if we talk about an elderly care, because this I have seen or this I have experienced firsthand when I was working with elders, especially in the tertiary care centers or the old age homes, what I have seen that they are left by their next of the kin or the children's or the caretakers like that only in the old age homes or the tertiary care centers, and the things they don't have knowledge about their rights, and they don't have any kind of uh, like knowledge about what should be done and what can they do or what they can refuse. And sometimes this can actually backfire onto us also, because what will happen if anything happens to the patient, a medical negligence happens to the patient, it will backfire onto us that how can we do this, and or how that we will be held responsible for this thing. So getting a knowledge about all these things will actually safeguard you on the first place. Secondly, when we are talking about the elderly care, we in previous session, like yesterday's session, we discussed that we have to educate the patient, and we have been discussing this multiple times that as a physio or as a team member of the elderly care, one of the primary roles for us or for the geriatric care team is to educate the patient about their condition, about their treatment, and about various other legal and ethical concepts which will be helpful for them to live a independent life. Okay, so what we can expect from this lecture is that we should be able to describe any kind of legal issues that are there in this particular geriatric care practice. We should be able to describe the major ethical principles that have an impact on the older adults or the geriatric healthcare system. We should be able to discuss and differentiate between the personal values and the professional codes of ethics, and apply any kind of legal and ethical principles in the analysis of complex issue related to the older adults. Is that clear? Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
So first of all, we'll be dealing with the legal issues. Okay. So what are the legal risks when we talk about the healthcare of the geriatric patients? So we should know the basics laws and confirm that the practice what we are providing to that particular patient is falling within the sound boundaries of the KRAs or the job which has been subjected to us. Like for example, if we are not subjected, if a physio is not subjected to suggest any kind of medicines to the patient, we should we should always refrain from prescribing any kind of medications. Okay. Similarly, if a nurse is doing something, some therapy, they should know the sound boundaries when he or she is doing some procedures onto the patient. Like for example, if he or she is doing a suctioning procedure onto the patient, they have to look for the level of oxygen, the SpO2 levels in the on the patient, so that the patient does not go into a hypoxia state, and maybe he or she will be critical in managing the patient. So everyone has to play a very important role in understanding the boundaries where they want to practice, and know the basic laws and what they have to do. Then as a physio, we also, or as a team member, everyone should know them that they are autonomic or autonomous in functioning. We do not need to wait for the other to comply or to tell us that what is needed to be done. We ourselves have to go up to the patient. We know this is the requirement of the patient. We have assessed the patient, and we have to start the things what is good for the patient, what is under our medical and ethical values, under our educational or knowledge boundaries, and which is better for the patient. We should start without actually waiting for the others, because we have an autonomous role for this thing. Okay. We need to supervise the unlicensed personnel and be accountable for their actions. If there is a person who's taking care of that patient, if for example, if there is a caregiver which has been given to that particular person or that particular patient who is not licensed, we have a lot of workforce which is not licensed actually. Okay. The nurses are licensed, they are registered with the Nursing Council of India. The physios are registered with IAP, or now the upcoming state physical therapy councils in whatever the states we are having. Or for the doctors, we have IMA, and pharmacists, we have PCI. But the workforce which are usually working for the fourth class, which we usually say, okay, which are doing the work of lifting the patient, helping the nurse to transfer, or giving the food, or everything. These are the people who are not licensed actually. Okay, they don't have anything to cover them up or supervise them, or which bounds them with some legality. But it becomes our responsibility that we supervise them and be accountable for their action, because at the end we are the team. Okay, they are working under us, so we are the supervisors. We have to make sure that we become accountable for their actions, and we always instruct them what is the best thing which is possible for that particular subject or patient. Be aware of the violations of the right of the older adults, which may lead to a legal issue. So you need always to be very thorough or very clear with this thing, that whatever is the adverse event which has been reported or which you actually see, please make sure that you always be aware of violation of the rights of the older adult, and if there is any, please advocate for the older adults rights. Okay. Biggest problem what is there in the Indian society or anywhere in the world, it is, I'm not saying about the Indian society only, anywhere in the world it is, this is not my matter, I'll keep my nose out of it. Okay. But if you are not addressing to it, you are not calling against it, you are a part of that particular violation. You are the violator. You are at wrong when you are not raising your voice against what is when a wrong is being done in front of your eye and you are not opposing it. All of you are well aware with the conditions in our country right now. You know about the cases which are going on in the press and the media, and everyone is having lot of information about it. If See, if anyone is not raising their voice against the miscreants or the wrong deeds, they should be they are called uh, like they are called what we can say, equally uh, what we can say, they are equally responsible for that particular miscreant's deeds or anything like that. Okay. Okay, is my screen visible or not?
So it's not visible
No,
to
sir.
me.
No, sir.
You have to tell me. That's why.
In the
Okay.
beginning it was, then it disappeared.
Now is it visible?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
The legal issue screen.
yeah, the legal issue screen.
Yes.
Earlier it was also not visible, the legal issue screen.
The first time it was, after that, again it went away.
Yeah, just a minute. I'm just working. I guess there is some background app which is working, so I'm just closing that up.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So, are you clear till now what I wanted to tell you about? What I wanted to tell you about, is that clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Because I haven't written anything onto the slide as of now. I've just told whatever the things I wanted to tell you about the basic legalities which are there. Okay. Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir. But the screen is not.
Now I have just now you won't face any problem.
Yes.
Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So what we were discussing was the legal risks. So everyone is clear with the legal risks. Okay. What all are the legal risks that you can face or you have to address while taking care of the elderlies? So if we talk about the situations that increases the liability or increases the risk of these legal issues, so what all situations can come to your mind? Can anyone of you just think, if you are working with an elderly, all of you are actually practitioners, so what all things can be there which can cause a increased risk of legal issue or increased liability?
Consent,
Okay. No, I'm asking what are the situations which can increase your liability?
Lack of documentation.
Hmm. Okay. Anything else? See, whenever we are talking about an liability, we need to understand the concept of the standard of care. First of all, we need to establish a standard of care. What is a standard of care? It's a norm, or it's a guideline which gives an individual some baseline data or baseline information of what to do with a particular type of patient, or a particular type of situation, or a particular type of circumstance when it comes to their mind, or when they are subjected to that particular situation. Okay. So we need to set a standard of care. So if a patient is coming to your clinic, you must have established a standard of care or standard protocol, which we usually say SOP, standard operating procedures. Okay. So anything, if it is not followed as per the SOP, will actually cause an increased liability for legal issues. Is this clear? Is this clear to everyone? If we are actually not following the SOPs or the standard operating procedures or the standard of care, we are not formulating a baseline. This has to be done. Anything, if it will be falling apart from this standard of care or SOP, will be leading to a risk of liability. See, everyone is operating some kind of machineries in their house or actually driving onto the road. So we have been given a certain set of guidelines that you need to follow when you are on the road. Okay. And if the people are not following these guidelines which are there on the road, what is happening? There is an increased liability of this risk happening, and this which is leading to a legal issue, or sometimes challan, or sometimes other kind of road accidents. Okay. So are you able to get this thing? Following a standard protocol?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we are saying that we need to have a standard of care, so what are the things that which can cause a situation of the increased risk of liability? When we have a failure to provide service in a competent manner with this within the standard of care, and we are not able to fulfill it. For example, we are working with the insufficient resources. If you are working in a healthcare setup, you are working for the elderly care, and you don't have oxygen cylinders at disposal, you don't have enough manpower at your disposal. So what will happen? You won't be able to give the patient that optimum care which is actually required, just because of the insufficiency of the workers. Okay. Then the second can be, if you're not following the policies and the procedures which are actually set by the either the company or the place where you are working or the governing councils, if they have set up a policy and you are not following it, you may land up in increased risk of liability. The third thing is bending the rules. We try to bend the rules on our own. This is actually a tendency of every human being. They try to bend the rules as per their requirement or as per their ease. So this is actually one of the biggest reasons because of which the legal issues can occur. Fourth thing is taking shortcuts. Taking shortcut is one of the biggest problems that we as a physios are actually facing. Nowadays, people are very much ready to take shortcuts to give relief to the patient and show that yes, we are the best and we can give you the results in an instant. And they, what they usually do, they go for treatments like chiropractic or some other kind of manipulative therapies or some other kind of therapies which are actually not prescribed or not under the KRAs of a physiotherapist. And what can happen because of taking those shortcuts? These can land you in a bigger problem, a bigger legal issue. I don't know if you have heard about this news. There was one case which happened in Uttar Pradesh, where one person was practicing chiropractic treatment. He was actually not licensed also as a physio also, but he or she was running a clinic, and he was doing a chiropractic manipulation on a young person only, and something went bad and that person went into a quadriplegia. So that gave an issue of legality to that particular area. the center was sealed and everything was done. So similar kind of thing can happen on an elderly on a much higher rate, because in elderlies we know that they are already deteriorating in their healthcare conditions. They are osteoporotic, they are not, the body is not healing that properly, they have comorbid conditions, so we cannot take shortcuts onto their health. And one of the big things in India, because if we are not having because we are not having that much of workforce, so everyone in India knows or have worked at least sometime when they are either physically or mentally exhausted. So when you are physically or mentally exhausted, you are actually not able to make any kind of this proper decision. Your decision making will be hampered if you are actually very exhausted, either physically or mentally. People usually take the exhaustion only in the term of physical ailment, but a mental exhaustion or a mental burnout is actually one of the major concerns that should be addressed now, because it happens so quickly and it keeps on piling up onto the people, which actually deteriorates the condition of the therapist or the treatment giver or the caregiver, and can lead to multiple legal issues, which out of which the primary is making a wrong diagnosis or wrong treatment protocol. So is that clear to everyone, having talked about the legal issues? What all things can be coming your way? Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So coming to the malpractice. Okay. When we are talking about malpractice, what is a malpractice? Malpractice occurs when we fail to completely perform our duty, or a healthcare worker or a health elderly care team member is not able to perform his or her duties and cause harm to the patient. Okay. So if a person, a healthcare worker, is not able to completely perform his or her duties and can harm the patient, is a malpractice, and it should be always stopped or always checked. So what are the concerns of this malpractice? What all can be done? Okay. So what are the areas? If we talk about the areas, first is the duty. Okay. So what our duty is, we have to be completely sure and completely clear about the duty. What's our duty? What is needed to be done from our side for the patient? If we are not able to do it, we are not able to address to our proper duty, we are actually doing a malpractice, or we are doing, like, we are ignoring our duty, we are doing a malpractice. We are taking a shortcut, we are doing a malpractice. The second thing that will come is your negligence. Okay. When you are actually negligent of your duty or negligent of your working, a failure to confirm the standard of the care that contributes to patient injury, or with or without any intention to harm. Okay. So it is a failure to exercise the adequate care which should be subjected to that particular patient, is negligence. Okay. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Then the other thing is omission. Omission, it occurs when someone omit that is ordered or expected as a normal part of the treatment for the client. Okay. So when you omit, sometimes you omit or you mispronounce or misinterpret the instructions which are actually subjected for a healthcare provider, to that you need to do this, and sometimes because of negligence, or sometimes because of just sheer pressure or excessive workload, or as I told you, about the exhaustion, you omit the thing or expect the things as normal, and which further can lead to injuries. Okay, is that clear? So omissions can always be very problematic to the healthcare workers and the elderlies for addressing a proper healthcare requirement. Okay, these all things can lead to injury, which is a physical or mental harm, and it is a direct violation of the patient's right of living a normal life, which can occur because of any negligence or malpractice or omission. Okay, so we need to be very sure that we are not doing any kind of such activities which can actually worsen the condition of the patient. Okay, then there is something known as intentional torts. So these are the acts which are actually performed usually by the nurses with the intent to bring about a specific results. Okay, now they can be assaults, they can be battery. What is an assault? It's an attempt or threat to injure another person, and the battery is an unwanted or unconsented physical contact. Okay, so the attempt or a threat is a very serious or a very grave offense which is usually taken in the violation of the patient rights. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then what is the other kind of patient right? First of all, we talked about the assault or the battery. So assault, the difference between assault and battery is clear to everyone. Assault is a threat of harm or a physical harm which is done. Okay, a battery is an unwanted or unconsented physical contact. If you have touched the patient, or you have restrained the patient, or you have held on to the patient forcefully, is a battery. You need to understand these concepts or these terminologies very clearly if you are thinking about any kind of legal aids or legal issues for the elderlies, or in fact for any kind of patient. Okay, so you need to make sure that your patient has all the information about all these kind of rights, that what are his or her rights and what can be done for this particular thing. Coming to the next thing is defamation. Now, this defamation is a written or spoken communication that holds up a person in ridicule or scorn and tend to harm or his or her own reputations. Okay, so a defamation can be done to anyone. We are talking specifically about the elder care here, and this can be of two types. One is libel and other is slander. Libel is a written defamation and slander is a spoken defamation. Defamation is clear to everyone. We need to, when we are defaming someone. Okay, then there is an invasion of privacy. So a violation of the person's right to be left alone or to enjoy reasonable non-interference with his or her life is an invasion of privacy. When we are not leaving the patient, if the patient does not want to like talk to us or does not want to interact with many people, and we cannot force a person to do that, that's an invasion of the privacy. We're not leaving the person alone if he or she is not uh, giving a consent for us to come near her. We should not push it to a extent. Or if we are not giving that person a personal space, is an invasion of privacy and is one of the basic rights for any person in the world. Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Then before beginning with the elder abuse and neglect, few more things are actually there which can be as a violation of the patient right, which is a fraud, which usually quacks are subjected to doing. They usually do a fraud by doing some telling them some non-existential things which are not present in the patient actually, but they take out money or shell out money from them, and then they ghost them. Okay. And there is one more thing, is false imprisonment, which is again a violation of the patient right, just by saying that the patient abused a uh, person, or the patient is not cooperating, and sometimes what healthcare personals have been seeing doing is falsely imprisoning the patients also. So without looking at the other side of the uh, coin, we cannot always come up to a decision that the patient is only wrong. Sometimes it's also the healthcare workers which are doing wrong and actually violating the patient right, and then falsely imprisoning the patient. Is that clear to everyone?
So can you just explain false imprisonment again?
See, ma'am, see what happens when we are talking about the false imprisonment. Sometimes you must have heard in the media, or you must have read in the newspapers, what happens that patient, I have seen that personally in few of the hospitals, where the healthcare workers, especially the uh, junior staff, what they usually do, yeah, they usually give a false narrative of patient being wrong. I remember I was there in one of the old age home when I was working, when I was doing my internship actually. So there was one patient who was like, in everyone's book, he was a very negative patient, and he was subjected to multiple times. He was subjected to abuse, and he was subjected to all the things like for restrainments. And in fact, one of the caretakers actually called for police help, because she said that man actually abused her, tried to abuse her, and everyone took that into consideration. But when I was actually given that patient, that you need to take care of this particular patient, and I was with that patient for around a month or a month and a half, I got to know that that person was actually not that kind of person which was portrayed in front of others. He was abusive because when he knew that this is his property, or this is his space, and the other people are actually violating it, he wanted the things to be done in a certain way. He was from such background that he was always having a certain routine, and that routine was not being followed, and whenever he asked for it, he was subjected to abuse. So what happened, that he became aggressive in expressing himself. But because of that aggression, nobody actually tried to understand his aggression, why he became aggressive. And they called for a police, and they filed tried to file the complaint, which was a false narrative uh, done against that particular patient. So if an imprisonment is done for the patient because of some act which he or she is doing, without actually looking on the other side what actually happened, and specifically for that particular case, that caretaker actually tried to steal something from that person's personal belongings, and he actually found out, because he was very keen in observing all these things, because he was very organized. So when he found out that his things were a little bit misplaced, it was very easy for him to find out that somebody actually broke into his personal belongings or personal space, and was like they took out something. So he was very angry at that time, and this caused for a big chaos, because of which the police was actually called and tried to frame that patient. Okay, so I hope this is clear to you now, how a false imprisonment or a false charge can be pressed against the elderlies or the patient.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Coming
Thank
to
you,
the
sir.
yeah, anyone else? Anyone else? Someone want to say something? Okay. Coming to the elder abuse and neglect. What is an elder abuse? So it can be defined as a single or a repeated act or a lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there is an expectation of trust which causes harm or distress to an older person. Okay, so abuse can be mental or physical or financial or social. Okay, it can be a single episode or a multiple repeated episode, or just a neglect or a lack of appropriate action which is required for an older adult, which should be done by anyone whom that person is having an expectation of trust. If that person is in a hospital or a tertiary care center or an old age home, that person is actually having a trust on the staff which is actually present there, that he or she will be helping that particular patient. And if we are not doing that, we are doing wrong on from our side. If that person is in his or her own home, and the next of the kin or the wife or the childrens are not subjecting that particular patient to the care or the appropriate action or an condition which can cause harm or distress to the person, is a abuse in that particular patient's home. Is that clear? So this abuse can be from anyone from whom the patient is actually expecting a care or a uh, like no stress. Okay, and if we are subjecting the patient to any kind of harm or distress, it's an abuse either from our side or from the next of the kin side. Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So types of older abuse. The types can be a physical abuse, a psychological or emotional abuse, a financial or the material abuse. A physical abuse is in any action that causes physical pain or injury is a physical abuse. Psychological or emotional abuse, the infliction of mental anguish, ignoring, isolating, shouting, all these things are actually a kind of psychological abuse or emotional abuse which an elder is usually subjected to. And as we all are living in the society, you must be subjected to seeing all these kind of abuses around you. Financial abuse or material abuse, the illegal or improper exploitation or the use of funds or the resources of the patients. I have seen multiple patients, they are living with their son or their daughters or uh, anyone like that, and they are on pension. And what their children are doing, or their what daughter-in-laws are doing, or what the son-in-laws are doing, they are trying to exploit the money from them. Okay, whatever the resources they are having, they are made to spend on the uh, expenditure of home or expenditure for buying some uh, properties or some lavish equipments or cars or something like that, which is actually not a responsibility of that particular person, but they are subjected to a financial or a material abuse. And this the uh, biggest problem with this kind of abuse is that the patients usually do not understand that okay, they are being abused of a physical or material physical or material requirements. Okay, they are being subjected to a physical or material abuse. Because what they are saying, okay, we are living with our son and daughter, or with some of our relatives. What's the harm in spending? Okay, they are doing so much for us, but it is not actually required. They cannot force them. I've seen people forcing them to spend or shell out money. Okay, so what, there has to be a consent for this expenditure, and has to be a limit or a boundary for that. They cannot be subjected to an excessive expenditure when they are not having all these things with them. Then there is reports of sexual abuse. A non-consensual contact of any kind with an older adult can be subjected to a sexual abuse. And when there is a neglect, a refusal or a failure to fulfill a caretaking obligation, including or excluding a conscious or intentional attempt to inflict physical or emotional distress onto the older person, is also an abuse. When there is a neglection, a refusal, or a failure to fulfill the caretaking obligation. Now, the government of India has also subjected that if the children are not taking care of their parents, the older adults, they are doing a crime if they are dependent on them. Okay, so when this is actually intentional, it is a more grave problem as compared to when it is unintentional. For unintentional, it can go for one time, or it can only happen one time or twice. But if it is happening repeatedly, that means that particular person is actually doing it intentionally. Is my voice clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Jayashree ma'am, I guess you need to uh, increase the volume of your speakers then, because I guess others are getting a clear voice now. Okay. Coming to the
Sir, not able to hear you.
am I audible to everyone? Am I audible to everyone? Please check.
Yes,
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 yes.
sir.
Ma'am, I guess Jayashree ma'am, you are facing some problems uh, from your region only. Okay. Now, coming to the prevention of abuse, how we can make sure that the patient is not having this abuse, or not is not subjected to any kind of abuse, is first to increase the public awareness and knowledge of the issue. We need to increase the public awareness and knowledge of the issue for the abuse of the elderly. We need to educate the system and train the professionals and the paraprofessionals in identification, treatment, and preventions of any kind of abuse. Okay, we need to further advocate on the behalf of abused and the neglected adults. And we need to study the cause, consequences, prevalence, treatment, and prevention of elder abuse and the neglect. So a research has to be significantly directed towards the elderly care and the elder abuse and neglect, which can solidify the claims and give out a proper methodology in which all these things can be reduced to a greater extent. I hope this is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Then there is one issue of abandonment, which we have seen very commonly in the Indian scenario. Although the Indian society is actually not that kind of society in which the elderlies are actually left on their own. But nowadays, if you look at the society, this kind of trends are actually on the rise. So it occurs when a dependent person or the person responsible for the care leaves the older person physically, emotionally, and financially defenseless. You go to the metro cities or any kind of city nowadays, you will find elderlies roaming around here and there, doing small works, or in fact sometimes sitting on side of the road, and they don't have much of the idea what needs to be done. I have seen patients in the old age homes. They are in the old age homes, the children are actually paying for their expenses, or in fact if they are also not paying for their expenses, they are actually in an old age home which is being run by an NGO. Sometimes this old age home is not sufficient for their uh, complete happiness. Actually what they wanted in their life was, because I have worked with them, and what I have listened from them is what they used to think in their prime when they were young. They used to think, I will work very hard for my family, my children, and when the time will come, my children will take care of me, and I'll be happy at that time. I'll spend more time with my children's, my grandchildren's, and my family. And I'll be happy at that time. And for them, when this reality actually strikes them that they have been abandoned by their family, they are not actually living with their family, and they are actually subjected to one bed in a dormitory or in an old age home or at road, it is quite painful for them. Although they are not having any kind of medical issues, but it's a mental issue what they usually go about, a mental trauma which they are actually subjected to. And this is actually far more worse than having any kind of physical ailment in their body. I guess I hope you are clear with this particular thing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Coming to the advanced directives. So, what is the advance directive? The advance directives are the written statement of a person's wish regarding the medical care. It's a formal, legal, endorsed document that provide instruction for care, which is kind of a living will or the name of proxy decision maker, durable power of attorneys. Okay, so for maintaining this, we need to have an advance directives. Okay, always when we are trying to subject the patient or anyone, if we are trying to educate the elderly, we should make sure and we should educate them to have an advance directive and make a proper living will in which they can provide instructions for what kind of medical cares they want when they are actually subjected to a kind of medical emergency or requirement, or who are the decision makers, who are the proxy decision makers, who are the people who are given this power to choose the treatment or the facilities or everything should be done in a written form which is actually documented. Okay, so usually people are doing the living wills and power of attorney for the legal purposes, like for the property or for the money and everything, but this should be done for the medical cases also. Okay, so this was for the legal issues. Coming to the ethical issues, so one of the prime ethical issues is the patient confidentiality. We need to make sure that the patient's confidentiality is actually taken care very seriously when we are talking about the ethical issues, and it's our duty to secure the patient's medical record, and we should not release them without a proper permission from the patient, or when the patient is actually sometimes what they do, the insurance agents or the insurance companies ask for the patient's record. So unless and until the patient is giving you an authority to release that, the company is giving an authority letter or a power of attorney letter from the patient for releasing that documents, please do not release these documents. So this becomes a very big ethical issue if you are not catering to the patient's confidentiality. So, and also we cannot discuss the patient issue with the family members before the patient's explicit permission. If the patient, see, the patient has all the right to know his or her own condition. But if the patient does not want the family to know about it, you should not discuss these things with the family. You have to comply with the policy of your working area to share the patient information and procedure for sharing. Always make sure that all these things are actually taken care of. Then we have something known as the informed consent. Now, this informed consent can be a verbal consent or a written consent, but always prefer that you have taken a informed written consent, because it will be well documented. Okay. Now, why is it required? Because the patients are entitled to know the full implications of the procedure or the treatment protocol, and they have to know the pros and the cons of the treatment, and then they have that ability to make the independent choice and the decision whether they want to go about that particular treatment or. I hope this is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, if we talk about the consent also, in this consent, when I told that the patient has an independent choice, the patient has a right to refuse for the care. If the patient does not want a particular type of procedure or does not want a particular medicine to be given to, the patient has a right to refuse for the care. You cannot, or we cannot subject the patient forcefully for this particular thing. Okay. Clear? So then one thing that comes is your restraints. A physical restraint or chemical restraint, a presumed benefit of the restraint should be clearly weighed against the risk of the complication and insult to the patient's dignity. We cannot see, this is a very big ethical issue. If we try to restrain the patient, I have seen patients being restrained in the old age home, and they are subject to, like, they have been bound to the bed, or they are subjected to a particular room. It's an insult to their dignity. And if it is not very required, okay, then the patient should not be subjected to any kind of restraint, either physical or chemical. What are the chemical restraint? When the patient is put up under any kind of sedatives, it's a chemical restraint. Physical restraint when the patient is bound, actually. Clear? So a physical restraint should be only used when the patient is a danger for himself or the others, or when all the behavior managements have been exhausted. It creates an obligation for the professionals to attend carefully to the negative consequence of restraint and preventing them. A chemical restraint is by giving the psychoactive pharmacological agent. It is prescribed with caution and only for the clear benefit of the patient. And we cannot apply this to every patient. If it is not required for the patient and an inquiry comes up or a legal issue comes up, we will be asked why you have given this restraining order for the patient. So we need to be very clear about this thing, that the patient should not be restrained against his or her own will if it is not useful for the patient, and if the patient is not a danger for himself or the others, or all the behavior managements have been exhausted. Now you don't have anything at your hand apart from restraining the patient. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Then we have do not resuscitate orders. Pooja ma'am is also not able to hear. Is my voice clear, or the network is something creating problem? Is everyone having problem in listening to me?
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir.
So everyone is able to
No, sir.
listen to me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. So the next thing is do not resuscitate orders, the DNRs. The DNRs are legal and binding and must be justified as a client request or be medically indicated. When a DNR order is made, the supporting documentation must include client's current condition, prognosis, summary of decision making, and who was involved. So DNR is do not resuscitate the patient. We all know about resuscitation. Do you know about resuscitation?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
In
Hello,
the
sir. I cannot hear you at all, sir. Is there a network issue or from your end or from my end?
I guess Pooja ma'am, there is a issue from your end because everyone else is getting my voice clearly. Ma'am, are you able to get my voice now? Yeah, okay, no issues. We'll continue. I guess there is a issue from Pooja ma'am's um,
I can
network.
hear you now, sir. I left
Oh,
the meeting and rejoined it. So now I can hear you, sir.
yeah, I guess that was the problem from your side only. No issues.
Thank you, sir.
So, what is a resuscitation? It's an emergency protocol when a patient or a person is subjected to a stopped breathing or a stopped heart rate, and the patient is resuscitated or reinstated into the consciousness, and through a proper resuscitation, which is a CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. But what will happen if there is a DNR which has been given? So DNR is a legal and binding document which is made by the client, and or it is medically indicated that the patient should not be resuscitated. Okay, there is no benefit, or the client wants that he or she does not want to be resuscitated, then a legal binding document should be made, which is known as DNR. Okay, now for making this DNR, all the supporting documentation should be attached, which is the patient's current condition, prognosis, summary of decision making, and who all was actually involved in it. Only a patient cannot decide that he or she does not want to be resuscitated. It has to be done medically. Okay, if the patient is terminally ill and does not have so much hope that he or she will live more, then we can give a DNR to that particular patient. And like we know that patient is onto the verge of last leg of his or her life. After a thorough examination and thorough decision making, along with the other medical professionals, a DNR can be given to a patient. I hope this is clear to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Withholding or withdrawing from the treatment, as I told you, the patient has the right to withdraw from the treatment. It includes action related to client's right to refuse treatment or withdraw consent for it at any given time. It is there in the research as well, and it is there in the treatment as well. The patient can refuse or withdraw the consent for the treatment at any given time, and we cannot actually force that person for any kind of um, uh, treatment, because it is against the ethics of the condition. Coming to the assisted suicides and the euthanasia. What is assisted suicide or euthanasia? So it's a grave decision, and certainly do not provide medication that hasten death in a patient. Ensure that the elderly patient has complete information when he asked to make the decision regarding the health care, and it is illegal in most of the country. Okay, so euthanasia is asking for a self-death or an assisted suicide. Now, if you'll see the image, you can see here euthanasia made simple. So one thing is suicide, and other thing is euthanasia, and the third thing is involuntary euthanasia, which is equivalent to murder. If the patient takes something by him or herself own, that's a suicide. Again, that's illegal. And if a patient is subjected to involuntary euthanasia, someone injected something else into the patient for the death of the patient, it's a murder. But if someone wants to have this euthanasia, have the choice of the death, then it is there for the voluntary euthanasia and involuntary euthanasia. For voluntary euthanasia, when the patient requests for a death sentence or a choice death, then it is voluntary euthanasia. And if the patient is in an incapacitated form, patient is in a vegetative state, then it's a non-voluntary euthanasia. The patient is not asking for it. Maybe the next of the kins are asking for it, or the medical personals take a decision in doing a euthanasia. It's a non-voluntary euthanasia. Now, this can be an active euthanasia or an inactive euthanasia. What is an active euthanasia? When a doctor administrates a lethal injection which can lead to a patient's death is a active euthanasia, and passive euthanasia is withholding or withdrawing the treatment. The time when you withhold or withdraw the treatment, which is actually keeping the patient alive, and as soon as you will remove that, the patient will die. Usually happens in the cases of the ventilatory support. So if the ventilatory support is actually removed, the patient will die off. So that is the passive euthanasia. You have to remember this: euthanasia is illegal in most of the countries. It is against the country's rules and the religious values of many people. They don't give permission for these things. Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Medical decision making for potentially incompetent patient. In incompetent, identify the appropriate proxy. If the proxy is unavailable, the best medical use the best medical judgment while locating for the proxy. As I told you earlier, when we're talking about the consent or the written directives, we always ask the patient about the permission for doing any kind of procedure or permission of doing any kind of medical treatment. But if the patient is incompetent, incapacitated, what to do? We always ask the proxy or the next of the kin or the wife or the children's or the caretaker and get their consent and then do a treatment. But what if that proxy is not available? Then we are subjected to do the best treatment as per the medical judgment while keeping out looking for the proxy. Someone will be there who can give the consent, and we will find it and then we'll get a consent for that. Up till then, when we are not finding any kind of proxy, we cannot subject the patient on not to uh, get the treatment. We will give the best medical judgment and get the things done and find the proxy there only. Then we have informed consent. The patient's bill of right clearly outlines the patient's right to be informed before giving consent to the treatment. The older adults and the caregivers have the right of all information available for arranging for court appointment. If the proxy is unavailable, discuss and take substituted judgments or which are there for the best interest. Okay. So for informed consent, we have already discussed it. Enteral feeding. It is acceptable to withhold treatment such as IV fluids, antibiotics on the request of the appropriate proxy decision maker when life prolongation is no longer appropriate goal. Okay. So if the proxy decision maker who has been subjected to the power of attorney wants that we withhold the treatment such as IV fluid, antibiotics, we can do that. Okay, it is acceptable, and when they want that life prolongation is no longer required for the appropriate goal. Then patient opposition to placement, placing the patient in a nursing home based on patient's will. Nurses to remember the right of the patient as well as the caregivers. So they need to understand that when they are taking care of the patient, they are not violating the conditions of the patient or the violating the rights of the caregivers. And when all approaches fail, contact outside sources such as ombudsman and hospital ethics committee to what to do for that particular condition. If the patient is non-responsive in a vegetative state and the caregiver is asking or the proxy is asking for euthanasia, or as I told you about to stop the enteral feeding, we need to talk to the hospital's ethical committee or ombudsman or the legal aid team for taking the appropriate decision for them. Is that clear? Okay. So what we need to understand from this is that we are highly skilled healthcare workers, and we are abided by certain ethical principles, and we always need to make sure that we have this ethical knowledge, and we should have these code of ethics which will work for the betterment of the patient. Okay, so always have uh, as a physio or as a healthcare team member, I'll always ask you to have certain personal values, certain professional values, and adhere to the code of ethics which are actually required for the management of the patients. So whenever you are actually trying to take care of a patient, there should be certain kind of questions that should come to your mind. Okay, what are the ethical principles and the duties related to appropriate action by the caregivers? Okay, so if someone is being given a treatment or subjected to a proper condition. Okay, so we need to be sure that we understand the ethical principles and duty which are required. What are the optional actions which can be done if the patient is not ready to consider this treatment protocol? What are the optional actions that can be done for the management of the patient, and what are the obligatory actions if the patient is still not taking the consent or not giving the consent, or not able, you are not able to manage the patient? What are the obligatory actions which can be done for the management of the patient? Should be the questions which should come to your mind while taking care of any kind of patient. Okay, fine. So with this, we are actually done with today's session. So is there any queries or questions to from anyone? You can have a discussion with me now.
Sir, I had a question.
Yes.
So like in the hospital, they have the consent form and everything. So
Yes,
when
ma'am.
it comes to DNR, so are they also basic forms, or is it like, there's a process, a lawyer will
No,
give
ma'am,
a form?
there is this process in which once a patient requests for a DNR, then as I told you, everything should be there. It should be supported with the relevant medical histories, examinations, and reports from the treating doctors, and also from the next of the kin, or from a consent from the patient. Then all these things are actually written on a paper and is being signed by the patient, subjected to the witnesses also. Once all these things are done, only then a DNR can be executed. Otherwise, no one can directly say the patient to go for a DNR. It's a highly uh, like it's a very strong paper which is required, and it has to be backed properly by all the kind of evidence which is required.
So there's involvement of a lawyer, or only doctors and medical faculty people are involved in this?
No, ma'am. The legal team for the hospital will take care of this.
Okay.
The legal team of the hospital is there. We have legal teams in the hospital which are working. They will take care for this, formulating everything.
Got it, doctor. Thanks.
Anyone else?